Okay, so what we're going to look at in this video is we're going to look at some circle basics. Just some of the basic vocabulary that we covered in class the other day, last week on Thursday. So basically, every circle has certain components. The first thing is, what is the definition of a circle? Okay. Well, a circle is not the shaded area in here. The circle is the set of all points equidistant from a given point. So the center of your circle, this is your center, I'm going to call it C. Well, actually, you can call it center so you can see it. The center of your circle, and when you take that center and you think of all the points that are the same distance away from that center all the way around, that's going to create a circle. Okay? So the definition of a circle is the set of all points equidistant. And what do you think equidistant means? Oh, that's right, you can't answer. This is a video. Equidistant from a fixed point. And that fixed point being the center. So all of the points on the circle are just this brown rim. Those are the points in the set. Because if you ask what the circle is and what points are in the set, that is the circle, it would just be those on the rim. So with that being said, we have a few things that we can do with the circle. First of all, we have what most of us have seen, and that's a pen that's not working. So we have the radius. So a radius, right here, the radius of a circle is a segment that goes from the center of the circle to a point on the circle. So that's the radius. It goes from the center of the circle to a point on the circle. Notice this point is actually on the circle. It's part of the circle. Okay? So that's your radius. Alright? The radius is something we use quite frequently when we're doing circle measurements. So keep that in mind. Alright, then we have a diameter. The diameter I hear my kids coming. In a minute, honey. The diameter of a circle.
Can we go play with our robots?
Yes, Mommy's filming. Go. Sorry about that. They've got robots from Star Wars. So the diameter of the circle is the segment that goes from one part of the circle. It has endpoints. Remember, these are endpoints. The diameter has endpoints that are on the circle, and it passes through the center. Okay, endpoints that are on the circle and passes through the center. So let's go ahead and let's just put some definitions out there, just so you know what they are. All right. So again, we have the radius. The radius of the circle is the segment, and that word segment, we're going to use that a lot. We'll go ahead and box this in so you can see it. Is the segment with endpoints whose endpoints are the center of the circle and a point on the circle. Just so you can see it, so you can read it a few times, because you love to read in math. That's exactly what we love to do. So a radius is a segment with endpoints as the center of the circle and a point on the circle. The diameter, which we just drew, the diameter is also a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. That's big, on the circle, and it passes. I know, honey, I know. It passes through the center. Sorry about the shadow being created here. It passes through the center. So the diameter not only has to have endpoints on the circle, it has to pass through the center of the circle. So that's the diameter. Now, one thing about the diameter is the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius, because d equals 2r. And why is that? Well, the radius is halfway, the diameter is all the way. Okay, so those are some points that you've seen before probably if you're familiar with circles. So the next thing we're going to look at is what's called a chord. And a chord looks something like this. This is a chord. All right? And a chord is a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. So a chord is a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. Now I want you to look at something here. What is the difference between a diameter and a chord? Doesn't that diameter have the same definition? A segment whose endpoints are on the circle? Segment whose endpoints are on the circle? What's the only difference? The diameter passes through the center. The diameter is actually the longest chord in a circle. So you need to make a note that this is actually the longest chord. The diameter is a chord. So when you look at the chords in a circle, the diameter is the longest one. A chord has endpoints on the circle. It's as simple as that, okay? All right, so that's chord. So now we're going to look at another segment, tangent. So we're going to create our tangent here. This is called a tangent line. This is called a tangent. Okay? A tangent is a line that intersects the circle at exactly one point. Okay? So a tangent is a line, ray, or segment that intersects the circle at one point. And that point is called the point of tangency. So this point right here, that is the point of tangency. That is the point where the tangent actually intersects the circle, okay? So you can see now we've got all these different types of segments and lines and rays that have to do with a circle. Now, one thing I want to note about the tangent. You've ever heard somebody say, I'm going off on a tangent? Well, I do it all the time. And going off on a tangent means that you're having a conversation. And let's say you're having a conversation, and I know the example that I used in class is that, and this is, here's your conversation. You're having a conversation about number 23, Michael Jordan. You're talking about how awesome he is, his basketball stats, everything. And then you get to this point here in the conversation where you talk about Air Jordans, right? So we're going to call these Air Jordans right here. So then from that point of Air Jordans, you say, somebody else says, oh, wait a minute, Air Jordans. Well, actually, I like all kinds of Nike shoes. And then somebody else says, oh, well, what are your favorite kinds of shoes? And then all of a sudden, we are no longer talking about Michael Jordan. We are now having our own little conversation about shoes, right? What's the only thing that that conversation has in common with the original? That point of tangency. When you go off on a tangent, what you do is you take one point that's related to your circle, to your conversation, and you take it in a completely different direction. And it's called a point of tangency because it only has one idea or concept in common with where you started. Okay? The point of tangency, when you think about it, if you're driving a car, if a rock gets caught in the tread and gets slung from a tire, it's going to get slung whenever an object leaves a circular path. It is going to leave the circular path at a 90-degree angle, at a tangent. It'll leave the circular path at a tangent. When you're slinging something around and you let go of it, it's going to leave at a tangent. And so that's how the tangent is created. So we've got one more special segment to talk about, or not especially special segment, but one more type of item that's associated with a circle, and that is the secant. So I'm going to draw a secant right here. This is the secant. Not secant, not second, it's a secant. And a secant is actually a line, segment, or ray, line, ray, or segment that intersects the circle at not one, but 2 points. Okay? Now, here's the thing. If it is a segment, it has to pass through the circle. It's not like a chord. A chord stops on a circle. A secant goes through the circle. Technically, we can't use a segment for this because a segment indicates that it stops. Now, you can have a segment that goes through the circle and hits at 2 points, but you could also get that confused with a chord. So secant, a lot of times you're going to see the definition presented as just a line or a ray. But technically it can be a segment. It's a very long segment that goes through the circle. So you have the chord. Let's go once again. We've got the radius, which goes from the center of the circle to a point on the circle. You have the diameter, which goes from one point on the circle to another and passes through the center. The diameter is the longest chord. Remember, that's important. It's the longest chord. Then you've got the chord itself, which is just a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. Then you have the tangent, which intersects the circle at a single point, called the point of tangency. And I didn't even spell it right, point of tangent. That's the point of tangency. Good gravy. Point of tangency. And then you've got the secant that intersects the circle at 2 points. And remember, a circle is the set of all points. And I'll box this in too. It's a set of all points that are equidistant from a fixed center. And that center is right there. I've labeled it. So that is how you label a circle. Those are all the special segments.